So your focus is very much on the individual experience of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And you've mentioned those three things first, and programming. Let's talk about programming because, tell us about programming.
Yeah. So we're all humans, and so we all have programs, whether we realize that they're there or not. And it's basically, when you think about how we started out in the world, we all started as these blank slates that, we were subjected to certain experiences. You had your parents, you had your teachers, you had your siblings, if you had any, your colleagues, your peers, your friends, and being exposed to these different circumstances and these different people left a mark on you. And some of it is good and some of it is bad. And there's all kinds of ideas and beliefs and notions that you carry around with you that you don't even question. And it's become so automated that it is kind of running the show for you without you even realizing it. Okay, because it is subconscious. And that's actually the job of our subconscious mind, is to take certain things that it deems something that can help us stay safe and survive in the world, and bring it below our conscious awareness so that we don't have to think about it, because it would be exhausting. Think about this. If everything that you do on a regular basis, you had to think about, like, imagine driving a car. Remember when you first learned how to drive a car, right? And you were just like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I have to look left. I have to look right. I have to turn. I have to this, right? Like, it's exhausting to have to think about it all. And it's like, don't talk to me because I have to focus. But now we can drive and we don't even remember how we got from point A to point B. And that's because that entire thing has been learned and routinized and pushed under our conscious awareness so that we can do it and it doesn't tax us. So that's a good thing when things become subconscious, if they're helpful. But then we have some things that we have just kind of accepted or haven't questioned because that's how we were raised, or those were the experiences that we had. And that's the interpretation that our brain came up with at that time. And it could be when we were 3 or 5 years old, where our brain wasn't fully developed. And I'm saying this from experience because I've worked for 20 years with therapy clients, and I know this is what it always comes back to. And so when we bring that online and they have more self-awareness of this is what they believe, and this is the conclusion they always end up with, no matter what it is that they face in the world now as an adult, right? If you can trace it back to these core beliefs, that's what it always ends up. So for instance, if you have somebody who believes that they're not good enough, which is a very common belief, then every time something happens, their brain is processing that experience through the lens of, I am not good enough. So this person didn't pay attention to me because I'm not good enough. And this person didn't give me this promotion at work because I'm not good enough. And my wife left me because I'm not good enough. And my kids don't respect me because I'm not good enough. Right. And so we don't even recognize that this is what's happening, but that's part of the programming. And also, if you believe that about yourself, then what happens, especially if you're one of these high achievers who also values accomplishment, you're going to find ways to overcompensate. So there's this desire now to go above and beyond, which is where we're putting so much into work and we're neglecting other aspects of our life because we want to feel adequate. We want to feel valuable. We want to feel worthy. We don't like feeling like we're not good enough. So it's like, I believe it, but I don't like it. And so I have to do something about it. And I have this idea that if I do that, then I'm going to overcome this uncomfortable feeling within me that I am inadequate. Right. So think about people who have imposter syndrome.
I just wrote that word down.
Yeah, that's an example of a thinker, right? When I said I have my 3 kind of types, one of the examples of a thinker is somebody who's got imposter syndrome. And so I've worked with a number of people like that who, as accomplished as they are, everybody can see that they are super accomplished. I had this woman that I worked with who was in a construction company. She was elevated up to VP of the company. Like that's how much they approved of her and thought she was doing a great job. But it didn't matter. Didn't matter. Every time she had to send out a company-wide email, she would be scanning for errors 2, 3, 4, 5 times over. Because she was like, if I send this and it has any sort of mistakes in it, they're going to recognize that I don't belong here. They're going to realize that they made a mistake. And so imagine if that's you and everything you do now that could take 30 seconds now takes 10 minutes. And multiply that times all the tasks that you have every single day. That's a lot of extra time at work. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of anxiety and a lot of energy spent on something that's not even real. That only you believe, that nobody else thinks about you. Like you're so worried about people's perception of you. Nobody else is buying into that at all. And you're just like, I refuse to believe that, you know? So these are the kinds of things that are part of our programming that are really detrimental to our well-being.
I mean, it's often, I think it's said in Jesuits or Francisco, I forget, they say, show me let's be appropriate. Show me the child at 7 and I'll show you the adult, and a lot of these values are ingrained very early on.
Yes.
Is reflecting on that, what therapy is all about? Is that the therapy journey? Is that what one has to go through to change those patterns?
So I would say that would be a helpful thing to go through in your life if you decide to do that work in therapy. Yes. Especially if you have trauma, very helpful to heal from it, to process it, because so much of our identity is wrapped up in these ideas, right? And a lot of times it's just that we've misinterpreted things. So imagine if I told you, the reason that you feel so horribly or that you have such low self-esteem is because there was a misunderstanding, right? That you just told yourself this story that doesn't actually add up, but you believed it. And it's causing so much turmoil in your life. Like, wouldn't you want to rewrite that story? Right? Like, and I feel like that's what happens for so many of us. Like, if we have trauma in our lives, right? If somebody has perpetrated something against us as children, especially, there's so much shame that we carry as if we, the victim, did something wrong. And so we have the story of like, well, I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have showed up, or I should have told this, or right. And we keep telling ourselves like, it's my fault that this horrible thing happened to me. And that's the brain of somebody who is either too young to understand the truth or too emotionally wounded to be able to think rationally. And we know that somebody like that, if you ask them, well, your friend just experienced X thing, and they think that it's absolutely their fault, what would you say to them? They're like, oh no, of course not. Like, of course it's not your fault. Oh, you poor thing. But we can't have that self-compassion. We can't have that compassion for ourselves in the same way that we have it for other people. And I think it's because we're so wrapped up in the shame and the guilt. And so, yeah, I think doing some of that work in therapy would be super helpful. What I focus more on in burnout coaching is just helping people identify that there are some of these erroneous notions and helping them wrap their mind around the fact that they don't have to buy into it and that they can do things differently. And we work through it in less of a therapeutic manner, but more in terms of like mindset, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Now, the second aspect you mentioned there was environmental aspects, and I guess by that, you've used that word environment in a very broad context. Could you just expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. It could be all these different aspects of your life. So your work, and even that you can break it down even further. Could be like a task that you're working on where you don't feel confident. It could be the timeline that you have to get your work done where it feels unreasonable. It could be the number of tasks that you have. in the time that you have allotted, all those kinds of things. It could be that you work with somebody who's a micromanager. It could be that you are in a toxic work environment, that maybe you're being discriminated against at work. It could be that you are working inside of a team and you have to wait until your team members have done part one before you can do part two, and they're stalling or they're not taking their time, and you're getting stressed out sitting here and waiting because, there's that crunch that happens the closer you get to the deadline, and the longer they take, the less time you have. There could be a million things just under the umbrella of work. And then we have everything else in our lives, all of our relationships, right? Whether you're single or married or dating, dating itself is like so stressful, right? And we have marriage, which we have so many people getting divorced because they're having so many issues. And we have parenting, which is super stressful. And we have health issues that come up for us. So what if you get diagnosed with cancer, or what if you have an autoimmune disease, or what, right? Like there's endless amounts of things that stress us out in life. And now imagine that you have one from this category, one from that category. And like, that's kind of normal, right? There's all different things happening all at once in our lives all the time. Then we can say it's pretty stressful to be human, and it's pretty normal to have stress.
Yeah.
But it's really up to us to learn how to manage that stress to prevent burnout. And that's what I'm here to teach.